Hey everyone, good day to all of you. Hope you're all doing well. So, wanted to talk today about the FightLite MCR. I've been messing around with this, trying to get it to run reliably with an FRT for a few months now, and it's still not running 100% reliably, but I've had a pretty good amount of time with it, got a decent amount of rounds through it, and I've got it set up well enough at this point that it's mostly reliable. So that's why I wanted to talk about it today. I think it's an interesting enough upper that it warrants an actual video. So how this is going to work, I'm going to of course be talking about this as kind of a gun review of course as well on the MCR, but I also wanted to intersperse a lot of discussion on how to get this to run reliably, and just a few other interesting points as I go about it, some kind of quirks of this kind of setup. And let's go ahead and get started with reliability. For just a little bit of background context on the reliability, as I kind of discussed some of the parts involved, I did purchase this as the commercial package. So what that means is, well, it comes with a whole lot of things. I'm probably going to forget a few things, but for the most important parts, it has a A2 flash hider. If you get their professional package instead, that has a muzzle brake, which seems absolutely insane for a belt fed, but comes with that. Comes with a carbine spacer, which you may or may not need. I'll discuss that as well later. Comes with a stronger buffer spring and an NH2 buffer, and it also comes with a proprietary bolt catch. Now you can upgrade to a bolt catch and release. The one that their commercial kit ships with is truly just a catch, so you can use it for an administrative locking it back, but you cannot use it to close the bolt on a reload. On those parts that come with the MCR, if you build it, set it up just like that, if you're just going to be using the magazine feed, it's actually going to run flawlessly. I've never had any issues using the magazine feed on here because this is a dual feed upper. Of course, the cool thing is the belt feed system, which is what most of this video is going to be talking about, but you can run magazines in here. And actually, when you very first do get this, FightLite recommends a 200 round break-in period where you exclusively use magazines and turn this to the highest gas setting, because this does have an adjustable gas block, and just run 200 rounds, which I actually thought was a bit on the low end. I would say more so you'll probably need to run 300 or even 400 rounds before the belt feeding starts to run even remotely reliably, and even then it won't be perfect probably with their whole spring setup. One more thing on that carbine spacer they send. So to understand what that is, it's pretty much just a spacer that you put in the back of your buffer tube right here, pretty much just like a washer essentially. And the reason that you may need that, so on the top of the FightLite MCR's carrier is a feed spike. Of course, you need that so it can feed from the belt, but it's slightly further back than a AR-15's gas key is. So you might run into an issue where when the bolt carrier group goes all the way to the rear, that feed spike might hit the top of your lower receiver. So I would recommend you test that first though, kind of with it disassembled, push it all the way back and see if it actually does collide, because on mine, I actually did not need it at all. Interestingly, if I put in the carbine spacer, which I did the first time I took it out, I could actually barely lock the bolt back on here at all, because I just had pretty much no clearance whatsoever. So I took it out, everything was fine after that, and I did test it, and I have plenty of space, at least on mine. Now, talking about the much more complicated part, the springs and the buffers in here. So you'll probably have to do, if you have a select fire lower, you'll probably have to do a lot less tinkering than I did, because I'm using this with an FRT. What I found worked best for me is to actually use, and I tested every spring I own, and I actually ordered pretty much Springco's entire lineup, and none of those worked either. But the weirdest spring, actually, an MG34 recoil spring, which I actually found out about that through Brass Facts video. It's very interesting. Actually, that MG34 recoil spring makes this run, like I said, pretty well. Still not perfect, but runs quite well. And it actually fits into an AR-15 buffer tube right here, and fits around the buffer and everything without any modification needed. Now, it is a very, very strong spring, so while you don't need to modify this, I would highly recommend, if you aren't already in your lower, if you do run that spring, make sure to use a reinforced buffer retaining pin. Just that way it ensures that it won't potentially get broken. A lot less chance of that happening, I should say. Once I installed that and put in that H4 buffer, I'm getting about, I would say, 95 to 97% reliability if I had to put a number on it. And so kind of how I'm breaking that down. So usually in a belt, if I'm just holding down the trigger, usually I'll get one failure to feed kind of randomly, either halfway to around kind of 2/3 of the way through a belt, where it won't even partially strip the round off of a link. It'll just totally fail to feed completely, essentially as if there's nothing in there. So I'm thinking that it's a timing issue, which I'm kind of thinking of kind of noodling some ways that might resolve it. I don't have any solid ideas yet, so I won't discuss that too much yet. I'm looking into it. Suffice to say that one happens very rarely, but kind of, yeah, halfway through a belt just randomly. The second kind of big part where I get a lot of issues with this still is when I'm reaching the end of a belt. So if I have, say, 7, 6, 5 rounds, somewhere around there, what I notice happens a lot then is as it's feeding in, a lot of the rounds, as they're chambering and kind of stripping off the link, rather than going down into the chamber, they like to actually nosedive and kind of get the bullet caught in the kind of the feed ramp area right there. And the reason I'm thinking that is, although I'm not 100% certain, but I think because there's not the weight of a whole belt kind of holding the rear of the rounds down so that they can be fed into place properly, I'm guessing that the lack of weight there is allowing them to tip up. And also, just a quick tidbit, because I forgot to mention earlier, one thing interesting I've noticed is there's a little bit, not much, but enough to be noticeable, difference in the cyclic rate with this between the magazine feed versus the belt feed. I'll play a bit of footage right here. It's, again, very slight, but you can definitely tell. The next thing I wanted to talk about as far as reliability is ammunition selection. So FightLite recommends that you run just good M855 through this. Now, I didn't actually run into any issues with any of the M855 or M193 that I ran through this. So what I have been running through this mostly has actually been PPU M193, and I haven't had any gassing issues or anything like that. To touch on that really quick, I did mention a little bit earlier, this does have a adjustable gas system here. It is external short stroke gas piston, which causes one interesting issue, but I'll touch on that in a sec. You have I should actually say you have 3+1 gas settings here. You have 3 actual settings, and then your bottom one is actually just a closed off setting, which I don't really ever use. This most gassed setting, I would really recommend, and FightLite actually also recommends that you only use that for like breaking in the gun, or if you're using extremely underpowered ammo. I haven't found a need to use that super high gas setting ever since then. I've been just running it on this second to most open, and it runs really well on there. The least open gas setting, I have had the occasional failure to feed from gassing with that, so depending on the type of ammo you're using, you might be able to get away with that one. It does, you know, it has a really pleasant recoil impulse and everything when you're using that low setting, but not always reliable. But to go back to my original point about the ammunition selection, so yeah, I haven't had any issues with the PPU M193. I also tested Lake City, Winchester, M193, MA55, and also I tried PMC MA55. Again, no issues with any of those. One edge fringe use case I would caution you on is match ammo or hand loads. So I did precision test this, as weird as it sounds for what it is, but I was curious about it, and I am going to talk about it as well later. But when I was doing the precision test, I had a bunch of match ammo out there and I had a bunch of hand loads, and I was actually getting a few slam fires with my hand loads. So the reason I think that is, it still uses a regular AR-15 free-floating firing pin back here. So what I think was happening, because I use those same rounds in all my other ARs and everything, never an issue, but I'm guessing because this is a short stroke piston, has that higher bolt velocity, it's just where it would normally be a dimple on my less recessed and a bit softer primers on that match ammo, and on the hand loads, it would instead set it off as a slam fire. So do be careful with those, but again, no issues with M193 or MA55 at all. Also want to talk about link reliability. So I've been using primarily 2 different manufacturers of the links. So I've mostly tested AK Stamping Company links. That's what I mostly have, just because they were a little bit cheaper, but I also have a few Lake City links. I would say, and it is truly ever so slight of a difference, that the Lake City links are just a little bit better. The AK Stamping Company links tend to be a little bit overly tight, and if you look at the finish on the 2 of them, the Lake City ones are a lot smoother by comparison, have a much better finish. Beyond that though, the only thing I would recommend to keep this running reliably is to just make sure that in addition to all the other standard AR-15 lubrication points, I would also say put some really good heavy grease on all the contact points and all the springs, all the hinging, kind of moving parts on the feed mechanism right here. I used just EWG, Extreme Weapon Grease, works really well, stays in place. That's why I like grease for something like this, just because oil tends to just run down way too quickly for a belt fed like this. I haven't lubricated the links at all. I haven't found a need to do that. I did see some forum posts online talking about lubricating the links and having good results with that. And I'm actually personally very averse to the idea of even attempting that, simply because once those links get ejected and they land in the sand or even in just like dirt, for instance, all that's going to stick to the lubricant, so it's going to be an absolute nightmare to try to clean that up. So that's the only reason that I haven't done that. I haven't really found it to be needed. Like I said, the links have been running mostly fine, aside from times where the gun itself doesn't feed, which I think is more of an issue with this itself rather than the links. So, next point I wanted to talk about on this is compatibility. So this MCR upper is supposed to fit on any just normal mil spec lower. The only thing you'll need to change, theoretically, is the bolt catch. Like I said, you'll need to put in their proprietary bolt catch, just because their upper receiver right here sticks out a lot more on the left side, so a normal bolt paddle would not fit. Now, the reason I said theoretically, so when I first got this, I actually had a ton of fitment issues with my trigger. So originally, I was using an old attempting to use an old FRT 15 L3 that I had sitting around, and the issue I was running into is the kind of the takedown pin section of the upper. When I was trying to close it on the lower, it would actually hit on the rear of the trigger housing and just would not fit. I actually tried putting that same trigger in a bunch of my other lowers, and again, just no luck at all. So the way I resolved it, I actually did pick up a different trigger entirely, picked up an FRT 15 C3. It's one of the two-stage versions, which is nice in and of itself, but the main reason that this C3 works in here is just because their trigger housing is a lot more self-contained to just kind of this section right here. So no fitment issues whatsoever. Now, that is a rare breed trigger, of course, and I understand a lot of people, rightfully so, really hate their politics. If you're wondering why I'm saying this, and yet why did I still pick this up, aside from this one weird compatibility issue, I've used that FRT 15 L3 on my other uppers, have tens of thousands of rounds on it at this point, and it's worked. That's why I went this route, just because I trust it to work well. So, if you recall earlier, briefly mentioned that I did do a precision test with this. Actually, it kind of ended up being an accuracy test as well, weirdly enough, which I'll get into. So, I'll start with just the precision test. So, with all my rifles, all my uppers, all my carbines, whatever, whenever I first get them, I do like to just kind of gauge how well they can shoot. I take out all sorts of different types of match ammo, hand loads, like I said earlier. And so if you've seen any of my previous precision tests, this one was no different. I did the exact same thing. So took out a bunch of targets, set them out at 100 yards, put a Schmidt & Bender short dot, just mounted it right onto here, and just kind of shot a bunch of groups and looked at whatever shot best. Had some they all did pretty bad, but there's a lot to dissect here. So I'm going to go ahead and play the footage, and I'll just talk about it after the fact.
10 rounds, 69 grain Sierra Tip Match King hand load, top left target. .70 grain Burger VLD. .75 grain Hornady Superformance bottom left target. Factory load. .55 grain Lapua S538.
Lot of bad things going on there. So let me start first of all with the zero. You'll probably notice that pretty much none of my rounds shot where they were supposed to. They were generally all going to the right and quite low. So interesting thing about that, before I even did any of the precision test, I did pre-zero this, got it pretty close, just with MA55. So it wasn't going to be exactly on because I was using different rounds, but it shouldn't have been as off as it was. Interesting thing is I did that whole precision test right around the 200 round mark, right when this was supposed to be broken in, but like I said earlier, I'm pretty sure it actually needs more break-in. And what I think was happening is the feed cover here was still wearing in and it was kind of shifting on its own as I was trying to adjust the zero on my scope to accommodate for it. Because actually after a few of those groups, I could see the impacts downrange and I saw that, oh, it's low and right. So I would adjust it. But the second thing is, of course, you saw none of those groups were good. That's pretty obvious. But if you notice how the dispersion was kind of patterning, horizontally stringing significantly, and that indicates a loose mount. So that can mean a lot of things. It can mean either the scope is loose, or the scope rings are potentially loose, the scope mount to the Picatinny is potentially loose, or, because I already know it's not thus, or this itself is loose, which it is. That's something I found out. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this on camera. It doesn't visually look like much, but this feed cover does have actually quite a bit of play to either side. And of course, what looks like a little bit of play here equates to quite a lot of dispersion downrange. So once I noticed that that was what was going on, I took this out again. This time I did another, this is more of an accuracy test at this point too. I put an EOTech on, just 50 yards this time, simply because I didn't have magnification, because I was also testing some stuff with height over bore and all that on here. And did the first group with just with Sierra tip match kings, just because those shot well and I have a ton of them. But I mounted the EOTech right here, pretty much the same spot that I mounted the short dot with. But then on the second group, I actually moved my EOTech up to here. So interesting results. I'm going to play that so you can see it right now.
10 round, 69 grain Sierra tip match king left target. EOTech moved, confirmed zero, 10 more rounds, 69 grain Sierra tip match king being fired at the right bullseye.
Didn't even really need to put the numbers up. It's pretty just obvious. I shot so much better when I had the optic mounted on the handguard here. Now, unfortunately, you will notice, of course, I don't have an optic mounted here now. And the reason for that, even though it did work so well, is putting anything up here on this MCR, although I was able to position my EOTech in a way to where it wouldn't interfere with my feed cover, it would just get in the way a lot. It would upset the balance, but that might be kind of the best option for an optic on here. Maybe if you put like an EOTech here and a magnifier back here, it would look really weird, but that might actually be the meta for this sort of setup, just because of the issues with how much the feed cover wiggles. It doesn't really hold zero as well as I'd like. Caveat, of course, this is a belt fed, more of kind of a high volume fire weapon. So I don't know how much it matters, even when it was getting that like 5.5 to 6 MOA. I don't actually know what the military standard is for belt fed precision, so maybe that's acceptable. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with the precision on belt feds, so let me know in the comments. I do know, I did look at some precision testing that people did online of like the Lima 6, and it was generally shooting about like 3.5 MOA, so kind of similar to how this was shooting with the optic mounted here to the handguard. So I think the system itself is capable. I think the barrel is well built enough for a belt fed. It's just the biggest issue is trying to find somewhere stable to mount an optic. And let me actually switch now. I'm going to start talking kind of part by part here on this upper. So I wanted to start by talking about the barrel. I have some complaints. This does some things well though as well. So FightLite offers the MCR in two different barrel lengths. They have 16.25 inches, which is what this one is, and they also offer a 12.5 inch. Well, I don't really see the point in that short of a barrel for a belt fed, but you know, whatever. I do actually wish they would offer a longer barrel. I feel like something around the 18 to 20 inch length for a belt fed would be really nice, kind of like an M249 type of length there, or at least a classic 249. Another complaint I do have with this barrel, nitrided. Now, normally I wouldn't care if it's nitrided versus chromelight. I've kind of gotten over that for the most part, at least on carbines, but on something like this, again, high volume of fire, chrome does do a lot better with heat. So a little disappointing that they didn't opt for that on here. For some things this barrel does well, however, this does have a QD barrel latch. If you are interested in kind of like historical firearms development, you will note that this is pretty much just like a more refined version of the barrel latch from the Stoner 63, which is kind of a little cool tidbit I noticed. How that works is just lock the bolt open, push this down in the front here on that serrated section, then you can drop the barrel out. You do have this handle here to handle the barrel if it's hot when you're removing it. I don't really like a lot of things about this handle. I'm glad they have a handle, but I feel like it could have been done a lot better. Like I mentioned earlier with the optic, this blocks a lot of the handguard. And furthermore, you know, if I wanted to put like a laser here or a flashlight here, I can't really. It blocks, occludes a ton of the space that would otherwise be usable. I wish that this was either slightly further out, or maybe if it was just free rotating so I could just have it slid out of the way. Or if it was just somewhere else entirely, that would be great. But as it stands, yeah, this does get in the way. And it's also, because it is, you can kind of see, this is pretty close to the handguard. It's actually kind of hard to grab this properly. You can't get your fingers, or at least I can't get my fingers under here really to get a really nice grip on it. For some other stuff though, that this barrel actually does really well, this has an incredibly just massive barrel diameter under the handguard. You can see it does taper down quite quickly after the handguard, so even despite this gigantic barrel profile, it still balances out pretty well. And of course, this does come with the A2 flash hider, unless you go with their professional package. I didn't bother putting a suppressor mount on here. I'm not going to do any suppress shooting with this, just because I don't really want to melt my suppressors. I don't have a belt-fed rated suppressor. The next thing, really important I want to talk about, really a big kind of Achilles heel of the FightLite, but really any civilian belt-fed or just high volume of fire weapon, and that is the fact that this has to be closed bolt, of course. If you're not familiar, any open bolt, even if it's semi-auto, is legally a machine gun in the US. So has to be closed bolt, which is suboptimal for a belt fed, because an open bolt does offer much better ventilation, doesn't trap as much heat in there, especially as you shoot a lot, so less risk of a cook-off with open bolt belt feds. Not impossible, mind you, but certainly a lot less likely to happen. On a belt fed like this, I really do like the fact that this is a short stroke external piston. And the big reason for that is that none of your heat is going back into the action to cycle the carrier. It's just all bleeding off at the gas block right here. And so I was kind of curious about this. I actually did a drill. I was just doing some passive practice, but I actually had a thermal camera running. And this was a movement drill, just kind of allowing a little bit of airflow, just kind of a more realistic, not just running a whole belt nonstop. So I'll play you that and you can see how it heated up. It did pretty well. The bolt carrier group stayed pretty cool. Chamber was relatively cool. You saw it still, of course, was going to get warm. Barrel up here, unsurprisingly, got really hot. I haven't experienced any cook-offs on here personally. Granted, I have been pretty careful about my firing schedule with this, but I've never done like belt after belt. Usually I've allowed it to have some pretty adequate cooling time, so it never gets exceedingly hot. I do want to talk also about the wear that I'm seeing on this. So I've had this for a bit. I don't actually have the highest round count on it, especially for what it is. but that's just because half the time, or actually more than half the time, I've been just trying to get this thing to run properly. I just have 2,000 rounds on it, which is a decent amount, but for what this is, I feel like you'd probably expect to have more, like I said. But as far as the wear that I'm seeing, nothing really concerning on the barrel. That's looking perfect. All the feed mechanism, the bolt carrier is actually all fine. The only weird spot where I'm seeing much wear is actually on the right side of the upper receiver, which is particularly odd because that is not where the cam pin is. So you might expect, just from looking at that maybe that's where the cam path is, but the cam pin on this was actually relocated to the left side. So I don't know what is wearing in and kind of gouging so much on the right side of the upper receiver. It seems to have kind of badly gouged like that at the start. Now it's kind of worn in, so maybe that was just part of the break-in process. Maybe something was too tight there. I'll continue to keep an eye on it, but that's where we're at there. Oh, and of course, I did mention this earlier, but just for the sake of completion, especially if you are skipping around the video, the feed cover did loosen up a lot. So that was the only other part where I'm seeing a lot of wear, or rather, I'm not seeing it, but I can feel that it's really loose, like I said, so has issues with the zero on here. All right, next up, moving to the parts on here, going back, I want to talk about the handguard. So FightLite offers two different variants of their handguard, which is really just a choice between M-LOK or Picatinny. I chose the Picatinny version because that increased surface area of the Picatinny rails should help a little bit with the heat dissipation on here. And again, for a belt fed where I'm going to be shooting a lot of rounds through it, I did want Picatinny just because it's a lot more durable, especially for this bottom rail here, loading off of a bipod. I have gotten some damage on a few of my other handguards where I'm really loading off the bipod a lot, where it'll actually kind of wear that M-LOK slot. So I wanted, especially for the bottom rail, to be Picatinny, but I don't mind having the whole thing Picatinny. Like I said, it does offer a little bit better heat dissipation. The only downside, and this is not exclusive to the Picatinny handguard, this is to both of the FightLite handguards. This is really short, actually. I wish this was just even a few inches longer. As you can see, I pretty much have this whole bottom rail occupied. I have an ARCA adapter here for when I'm shooting off of a tripod. I have the foregrip, which is just kind of comfortable, especially for how large the handguard is. Kind of hard to grip without a foregrip. And of course, I have my bipod up here. And this is a really tight fit, and honestly, I would prefer to move this ARCA adapter slightly forward and have a little bit more spacing between my foregrip and the bipod. But yeah, just even another inch would have been ideal for something like this. I did try a very stupid idea in hindsight, putting I have a gooseneck rail sitting around, one of the Zeneca ones that I tried mounting my bipod on. That was a mistake. If you want to try doing something like that, maybe if it mounts to the rail differently, it'll work. But for mine, I was actually bending that gooseneck rail. So that was, like I said, terrible idea. Way too much weight and force to put a bipod onto a gooseneck rail. Definitely do not do that. Now, one more small tidbit, just a quick note on this handguard. When I was picking up this Harper, kind of watching reviews, deciding if I really wanted to get it, I did come across a really old Larry Vickers video back when this was still called the Ares Shrike. And I noticed that they had Knights Armament rail covers on here, which I thought looked cool, kind of gave it like a Mark 46 type of look. But when I actually got mine and I tried to install, because I do have some Knights Armament rail covers sitting around, they didn't actually fit. The handguard, at least currently, does not have the notches necessary cut into it to fit those, which is why I'm using these rail covers here. These are actually Pro Mag rail covers that just look a lot like the Knights Armament ones, but they fit on any Picatinny rail. So that's why I'm running them here. In the case of that Larry Vickers video, maybe they just put those Knights Armament rail covers on for the thumbnail. I don't know, but worth mentioning in case you saw the video and you wanted to set it up like that, you cannot. So for the rest of the video, I just want to talk about kind of the more small parts that don't really matter as much. First thing I wanted to talk about is the sights. So this comes with Magpul MBus Pro LR sights. Actually, I haven't used those before, but they're really, really nice sights. I like them a lot, but I do not like them on this specific setup. And the reason for that is the feed cover sits really high. You can see the height just look like compared to the stock. So it's effectively like using a Unity riser on absolutely everything, and I really don't like that for iron sights. So I replaced this with some of the older fixed HK416 sights, just because these are the lowest ones I have just sitting around. So they work well on here. Another gripe I have with this feed cover is that unlike a lot of the other belt feds out there, this is just, I mean, you just open it, doesn't do anything else. And every belt fed that I can think of, though I'm sure not all of them, have a spring-loaded feed cover. So that way, once you open it, even if it's on a bipod and kind of sitting like this, it doesn't fall on its own, which is really annoying and happens a lot to me when I'm at the range trying to shoot this and inevitably get a malfunction, and then this thing's falling on me the whole time. You have to kind of keep a hand here while trying to clear the malfunction, which makes it really awkward. I really wish this would have just a spring holding this up when you have it open. Last thing, you'll note I do have a nutsack adapter right here. I usually just leave it in the lower when I'm just have it stored like this. And this works well. Only thing I would say is this does sit extremely low since it does need to clear the AR-15 mag well. There's no real way around that if you want to use just a regular AR lower. There are dedicated belt-fed lowers. For example, I think it's Black Widow Arms makes like the Omnifeed and the BFAR, I believe it's called, which both have this sort of adapter for a 249 nutsack, just cut into it several inches higher. So that would be really nice, simply because with how low this sits, it'll very frequently, in fact, pretty much always hit against the ground when I'm prone. So it has the potential to cause a malfunction if you're pushing into it too hard. Excuse the jump cut if I just had to put one in. My camera just ran out of space, so I think it cut me off mid-sentence. Luckily, I'm almost done with the video anyway. So last stuff I wanted to talk about is just the general use case of something like this. So I guess for me first, the reason that I picked this up was simply because FRTs are pretty prevalent at the moment, and I've always wanted to check out a belt fed. I just kind of, I don't have a ton of experience whatsoever with belt feds prior to this. I have shot them pretty much just at rental ranges occasionally, and you know, it's always at a static position. I don't really feel like I actually get to know how to run anything until I've taken it apart at least several times, like completely, and until I'm actually able to kind of run and gun with it and do a bunch of drills with it. So that's why I wanted to pick this up myself. I don't really see any realistic practical scenario where this is your best option compared to like a concealed carry or even just like a home defense rifle. I would say it's a cool thing to have. As far as civilian ownership, the amount of logistics and the amount of things that would have to go wrong for you to genuinely need, or not even just need, but for this to be your best choice for whatever is happening is just pretty much, I would put this so far down on the priorities. Just hopefully you watch this video as looking at this as something kind of cool and interesting. Yeah, as far as practicality, I don't see much practical usage of it. And we could get into a whole other discussion onto that, which would take way too long for this video. It's a really cool system, for sure, if nothing else. If you have any other questions, let me know. Take care. See you on the next one.